Based on his exceptional performance, I had the pleasure to write letters for him for the Harry S. Truman Scholarship and for admission to the Yale Law School. My wife and I were honored to be invited to his induction ceremony to become U.S. Attorney for the state of Utah. After law school, David worked for Sidley Austin, a law firm in Chicago with strong BYU roots. Rex Lee, our former president, was a partner in Sidley Austin and the chief litigator in that firm, representing clients before the United States Supreme Court before he himself became the Solicitor General of the United States. So David followed in Rex Lee's footsteps into that Sidley and Austin law firm. He left that firm to work for U.S. Senator Mike Lee from Utah as Senator Lee's chief counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm sharing some of these details with you because I think they may prompt some questions from you during the question and answer session in a bit. After stepping down as U.S. Attorney, he returned to Sidley and Austin. He later served as Vice President of Walmart, overseeing legal compliance issues for Walmart's $40 billion health and wellness business. Last October, Mr. Barlow joined the law firm Dorsey & Whitney, LLP. He will be working out of their Salt Lake City and Washington, D.C. offices. He brings a wealth of experience to you and me for ideas about possible career options, how to apply to and then succeed in law schools, how to apply a legal education to public service, how to balance a challenging profession with church and family responsibilities. He and his wife, Crystal, are the happy and proud parents of 4 children, 3 of whom are here today, or 2 of whom are here today. Please join me in welcoming David Barlow back to BYU.
So it really is a privilege to be back here. Every time I come back to this campus, it makes me happy. I'm sure you have had and are now making lots of happy memories too, but they don't all feel happy while you're going through them, do they? There's lots of stress and challenge and balancing and hard decisions, lots of victories, some setbacks along the way as well. I want you to know that my experience was just the same, and that I think whatever experience you're having right now, hopefully a great one, as your lives continue to develop and as time continues to pass, that will sort of develop and richen, and you will remember more of the good and be able to celebrate that, and some of the challenges and difficulties will recede as they just do in our lives. I want to thank Dr. Magleby for that generous introduction, and I want to tell you that I had the great privilege of working for him as a research assistant when I was here at BYU. As I was preparing my remarks, I just realized that I started here at BYU 30 years ago. And you're all looking at me and saying like, yeah, that looks about right. That's what I'd say about 30 years ago. But to me, that's shocking. Like I had to stop over that and think, really, I was started here as a student 30 years ago and had the privilege of working with Dr. Magleby. Some of your professors, who here knows Professor Karpowitz, Professor Monson? Just raise your hand if you know him, even if you haven't had a class. We were students together. So that's kind of how lives go and how they're intertwined, and frankly, how quickly the time goes. Now, this isn't the first time you've heard that from somebody like me, but I'll tell you, it passes in a blink of the eye. So I want to thank Dr. Magleby, Professor Karpowitz, Professor Monson for having me here. It's a privilege to be back and to talk with you. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the areas in which I've worked. Private law firms, in-house at a large corporation, Walmart, the U.S. Attorney's Office, just to give you some of the basics about how those places, kind of how they're structured, a little bit about what it's like, a little bit about what a typical day might be like, and then share some observations and take your questions. So first of all, a private law firm, and you'll know some of this already, but lots of folks don't, so I'm going to give you a little bit of detail. Law firms are often, though not always, structured as partnerships, and they can be any size, right? A partnership could be one partner, sort of David Barlow and associates, maybe without any associates. So sometimes it's just one attorney or a small number of attorneys. Sometimes they can be quite large. So Sidley Austin has 2,000 lawyers in 20 offices across the world and is a really, really big place. The way that those partnerships, or a partnership like Sidley, is structured is you'll have associates. Those are generally the newer attorneys that have been there for maybe 1 to 8 years. You'll have some attorneys who are called counsel. They've been there longer, could be 9, 10, 12, 15 years. Sometimes people permanently stay counsel. You'll have some attorneys who are seasoned, meaning they're more than 8 years, and they've been able to meet certain standards that the firm has, and those are called partners. And they often have a profit stake within the firm. And then there are senior counsel or senior partners who are very seasoned and have the kinds of roles that I previously described. So like I said, they can be small, they can be big, they can be very local, so just present in a particular community, serving that community, or they could serve clients throughout the world. There are, of course, other important personnel that work at law firms. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those avenues today, but there are paralegals who don't go on to get their legal degree, but may or may not get a certification in doing some, but not all of the things that lawyers do. So they don't go and present in court. They're not the ones who are responsible for the matter, but they support the lawyers in doing what they might do in court, in preparing paperwork and that kind of thing. And then there are, of course, legal assistants who do all kinds of paperwork, but none of the legal analysis, and make everything go by doing a whole broad range of different tasks. All right, typical career path for someone considering going to a law firm. If you're going to be an attorney in a law firm, you need a legal degree, right? So that's 3 years. You have a very fine law school, I hope I'm oriented right, sort of over there, founded by Rex Lee back in the day before he became president of the university. And I should add, Dr. Magleby mentioned the tie between BYU and Sidley Austin. There are many law firms that have any number of BYU graduates, either undergraduate or for law school, but there is a special association and relationship with Sidley Austin. In fact, I was back in the Washington, D.C. office of Sidley Austin, where I worked for some years, just a couple weeks ago, and there is a statue of Rex Lee in the BYU Law School. It's not full size like a frozen Han Solo or anything like that, but it's a beautiful statue that they have displayed in the conference room there of that great worldwide law firm, and I can tell you there are no other lawyers on display there, to give you an idea of what this former president of BYU did at Sidley Austin and the mark that he made on the Washington, D.C. Legal community. So think whether you're interested in the law or not, think of the impact that you yourself may make in 100 different ways and what that legacy might be. I venture to guess that when Rex Lee was an undergraduate student, and even when he was in law school, that he had not the fuzziest notion of the kind of impact that he would make for BYU and on behalf of others. All right, so you get your law degree, you pass the bar, and you apply to law firms. Generally, you will apply while you're in law school for a summer position with a law firm. It's not the only way to do it, but it's the most well-trod path. You take one of these summer positions, or two, between your first and second year and your second and third year. It gives you a chance to try on the firm, and it gives them a chance to try you on and see what you would be like. You get an offer from the law firm, and then if you decide to accept it, you're on your way. And you go work for the law firm, you start as an associate, and you follow that path that I've just described. All right, an in-house position like the one at Walmart. So many attorneys do work in-house, meaning instead of working for a law firm where they'll work for many different companies that then pay the law firm an hourly rate or a fixed rate for the lawyer services and then give the lawyer a portion of that, some lawyers will just go work for a company. Large companies like Walmart need many, many, many different lawyers because they operate all over everywhere. Even smaller companies will sometimes hire an in-house lawyer or an in-house compliance person. And so that's something you can do with a law degree as well. The most common path to go in-house for a private company or for a public company is to first go to a law firm and to gain some experience and training there, and possibly some exposure to clients. And if I were picking just the one most common way, of then getting in-house, it would be that you joined a law firm, you did work for a client, they loved your work, and they said, we'd really just rather have you here with us all the time. And then you give each other a big hug and you join them. Or maybe not, one way or the other. That happens a lot. Or sometimes people through big legal recruiting services will put their resumes out there, maybe while they're working for a law firm, maybe before they're working for a law firm, and then some company that doesn't have a relationship with them will bring them in for interviews, and they'll get that opportunity. All right, so that's kind of the structure. I won't go into great detail about the structure at Walmart. In some ways it's unique because it's the world's largest company. It has the most employees of any company in the world, millions of employees, which sounds like an exaggeration. When I say millions, it sounds like I'm saying a lot. I mean, it has millions of employees. So it's kind of its own thing and can go all the way down to the smallest companies that will just have less people, less lawyers. The U.S. Attorney's Office. So the United States Attorney's Office, every district in the United States, the United States is divided up into 94 federal districts. So we have the 50 states, but we have 94 federal districts that sometimes follow the state lines. In Utah, it's that way. The federal district is the same boundaries as the state of Utah. Other states like New York, California, Texas, they have 4 districts. They're divided up that way. Others have a number in between. And that's how the federal system is set. So the United States Attorney is the chief law enforcement officer for the federal district in which she or he is presiding. So in my case, for the District of Utah, that means that during that time I was responsible for all civil cases, non-criminal fights about regulation or money or civil penalties, and the criminal cases, any violation of federal criminal law, drug cases, gun cases, white-collar fraud, like tax fraud or other kinds of fraud, even some national security cases, those sorts of things. So the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Utah is an office of about 90 personnel in downtown Salt Lake, and then a smaller office in St. George. About half of those personnel are attorneys. I think it's a little bit larger now, but that's how big it was when I was there. How does an attorney get a job as an assistant United States attorney, someone who works for the office there in Utah? Usually those jobs are not obtained outside, like right after law school. Usually you go and work either for a district attorney, that's at the state level at the county, like the Salt Lake district attorney or the Utah district attorney. They handle all the state issues for their county, or the state attorney general's office that's in Salt Lake. You can sometimes get positions right out of school for that, and you gain some experience as a prosecutor or someone doing certain kinds of state civil cases, and then over time you make your application to the U.S. Attorney's Office and make your way over there. Sometimes people will go to a law firm and then they'll come over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, but they seldom take people right out of law school. One thing you might be able to do while you're in law school is, while they won't pay you, you can get a volunteer internship sometimes with the U.S. Attorney's Office while you're still in law school. And that can give you a great opportunity to see what that's like. I'm not the first person who has encouraged you to think about internships, but this is your way to kind of have tapas, right? Small plates, little tastes of things. Instead of committing to the big 30-ounce T-bone, get the little plates, taste them early, see if you like it, and then you can make your strong move to where you want to go. And the U.S. Attorney's Office, state district attorney's offices, state attorney general's offices are places where you can be a volunteer intern before you ever have to make the commitment of going all the way. All right, so those have been the 3 big areas. I guess I probably should take 2 minutes before I move on to note, as Dr. Magleby mentioned, I did work in the Senate for Senator Mike Lee on the Judiciary Committee, and internships with senators or full-time jobs with senators or representatives and others in Washington, D.C. is something that BYU knows all about and has been doing for forever, and does through the Washington Seminar, which I participated in, again, closer to 30 years ago than anything else. And that program has only gotten bigger and stronger and has a wide variety of jobs. Again, my recommendation to you would be, if you think you might be interested in that kind of thing and you think you can swing it now, sample it now. You can go pursue a full-time job and you may be able to get one, but of course, making that kind of plunge is a little bit of a commitment and can be costly. But the Washington seminar in particular makes it kind of easy to do and still gives college credit, is that right? So it's a nice way of saying, hey, I was going to spend X number of dollars anyway, so I'm going to go get some credit and I'm going to have that experience. All right, so those are the 4 areas that I've had the opportunity to work in. And I want to tell you a little bit about the differences, about the day in a life. So I'm going to group it this way. Right now I'm at a relatively large law firm in Salt Lake. So I'm at a firm called Dorsey & Whitney, has something like 700 lawyers all over the place, but in Salt Lake it's 60. So Salt Lake firms are not as big as the ones in Chicago and Washington, D.C. A day in the life, Dorsey, you wake up, you get in there. In Utah, you can live just about anywhere you want with very little complications. So you can live right downtown if that's what you want to do, or you can live a little further out if that's what you want to do. Usually the commute doesn't take you a long time. You get in there at a reasonable hour, and you take stock of what you have for the day. And I'm finding that it doesn't involve a lot of time zones, generally just a few. I'm usually thinking a little bit about work that may be in the Pacific time zone, all the way over to the East Coast, but usually more right here in Utah. And I'm focused on the matters that are there, coordinating with my colleagues, responding to emails, appearing in court if I have something that needs to be done there, preparing cases for what's called the discovery process. This is where you learn about the other side's case and they learn about yours. Some of that's in writing, some of it's sitting down with witnesses. And I do a lot of work that's called internal investigation work. That may not be something that you think about as much. When you see the law on TV, it's usually courtroom stuff, right? People are in there trying cases. Most law doesn't happen in the courtroom. Mostly it happens on paper and on phone and by email. Internal investigations is a special kind of legal practice where companies have some kind of problem. There's been an allegation of misconduct or potential problems, and then they hire somebody to come in and find out what happened and report back to the company so they can decide what to do about it. I do a lot of that. So it just depends on the client's needs. Now, a lot of that is very similar to what a person might do at a truly huge law firm like Sidley Austin in Chicago or DC or New York or LA. But here are the differences that I want you to be mindful of. So at a place like Sidley, again, the city difference makes a difference. So there, fewer people with families will live downtown. Some do, but mostly they don't, just because it's enormously expensive to be able to do that. Salt Lake's plenty expensive, but Chicago and DC downtown areas, very expensive. And so people usually, not always, everybody does whatever they want to do, but they usually move further out, so longer commute is one thing to think about. And then my practice in DC, at Sidley, particularly in DC, was very international. So I, instead of just doing work and having cases and having clients in the United States, I had clients that had needs through all of the time zones in the United States, but then also in London, in Belgium, in Switzerland, in the Czech Republic, in India, in China, in Singapore, stuff like that. So my day there for Sidley, I would wake up in the morning, instead of just hustling in, the first thing I would do is damage control from what happened at night while everybody else was awake and I was asleep. It's not a problem, but it's a different practice than what most people will do in Salt Lake. So that was a big difference there. The commute I've already mentioned. And then another big difference between, say, the legal practice in a law firm here in Utah and a place like Sidley Austin, there are a number of differences. One of them is in a Utah-based law firm, you have a very high probability of knowing relatively well over time most of the people with whom you practice law. But at a place like Sidley Austin, that's not really possible to get to know 2,000 lawyers. So you have to pick your spots more about who you're going to spend your time with and how you're going to get to know each other and what kinds of work you're going to do together. Also, the kinds of work that you would do would vary. Some matters are so huge that a client needs a very large outside firm. So if you go to law school and you go to a large law firm, you can do any of the matters. Even if they require a huge number of lawyers, you can do all of them. Now, the potential downside, or at least what comes riding along in the same cart with it, is when you're at a very large law firm like Sidley, you can't just do it your way. Right? You have to collaborate and work with the larger team, whereas if you're at a smaller law firm, you probably can just do it your own way. There's not as many lawyers. It may just be your matter, And you may not have the same kinds of matters. You may only be able to take matters that are maybe not quite as gigantic, but you can do it your way, and you can make those decisions on your own. So that's a difference between those two things. The difference between law firms and the in-house life. So Walmart, where I worked for a brief period of time as a vice president for compliance, is headquartered in northwestern Arkansas by the Missouri border, a place called Bentonville, because that's where Sam Walton started the company. That's where the first company was in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's a really small place. So we lived like 3 miles from work, and I would just jump in the car and boom, you're there at the headquarters. And that kind of in-house life, again, there's more than just Walmart, but in-house lawyers tend to have days that are meeting-driven. So their days are filled with lots of meetings with lots of different stakeholders within the business, coordinating between legal, compliance, the business, and others. At Walmart, I might have 120 such people that my team, which would be half of that, and then maybe another 60 people that I would need to be constantly coordinating with. So tons of email, tons of calls, tons of meetings, not doing the cases. You don't go into court. You're not the one actually doing the legal work. You're sort of managing the inside part of it. Whereas in a law firm, you're getting hired by the company, like a company like Walmart, to do the work and then coordinate with in-house counsel, if that makes sense. So in-house, more managerial skills, I think even greater premium on people skills and collaboration, and a greater ability to sort of multitask across a huge range of different things, but don't go very deep, usually, on any particular thing. In a law firm, you tend to go deeper on fewer numbers of matters, at least as a litigator. And so you can think about those sorts of things and what might potentially be more or less helpful for you. Another difference between a law firm and in-house is, of course, if you're working for a company, in-house you have one client, the company. That's who you represent, is this entity, this corporate entity, and your duty is to them, and all your work is for them. So you may have bosses within the company, but you represent the company itself, just that one client. When you work in a law firm, you're gonna have many clients, maybe even a huge number of clients, all handling the different things that they have, some larger, some smaller. And then you gotta juggle what those clients need you to do and kind of whose priority goes where and what gets done first. You have prioritization in-house as well, but not between clients, between tasks. So juggling tasks for one client versus juggling clients on the outside for a law firm. Okay, so on to the advice part, and then I think if I've got my timing right, by just after 5 will be about the right length for this presentation. I'll be happy to take your questions. What kinds of things would I offer to you as considerations that some people either shared with me while I was here at BYU, or things that I've just learned over time as I've been out practicing in the field? The first one, I think, sort of marries up with the advice that I sort of inserted in there earlier about having an early tapas mentality, many small plates early on in your career. And that is, invest a lot of time now and in the coming next years to try to figure out what it is that you really want, professionally and certainly personally as well. This is a great time while you're here at BYU, while you're taking that next step, whether it's law school or something else, while it's early in your career, to have a look around and to try a bunch of different things and see what suits you. And to spend a lot of time not only seeing whether the part that you're assigned suits you, but spending time with people who are at various stages down the road. So if it's a law firm or in-house, newer lawyers that have been there an intermediate amount of time, and people who've been there a long time, observing what their life is like, asking them questions, watching them and seeing how that all is. And then by your own experience and by the vicarious experience that you're getting from them, being able to make a more educated decision about whether it's something that you would do long term. Do that in the next while. You can do it throughout your life and you should continue to do it, but this is the easiest, best, most productive, highest ROI time to do it is in the next number of years. So try things on for size. Second, how many people have told you since you've been here at BYU be thinking about your network, be thinking about the people you go to school with, the professors you're working for, the job opportunities that might be there. Of course, everybody always says that. It makes common sense. But if it's possible, I would suggest that it might be even more important than it seems initially, and here's why. For me, it's two reasons, and I'll give you what I think is the most important reason first. In my humble view, at the end of the day, our lives really boil down to relationships. There's all kinds of different careers. There's all kinds of different places you might work, private, public, big, small, here, there, or over there, or some of all of that. And they'll make differences in your life, no doubt about it. But the people around you, those rich associations, the friendships, the other kinds of relationships that are maybe more professional, but where you're learning from each other, those kinds of things are a rich, rich treasure. They may or may not have great practical import in your professional life. Often they do. But in terms of your overall life, relationships are critically important, and they are more important than what you do by a lot. But the second point is, of course, about what you do. And you think about this great big world that we're in, and how many billions of people there are, and how many hundreds of millions of people there are just here in the United States. You have a chance over the course of your life with classmates that you're attending class with right now, with professors that you get to be in their classes, or maybe you get to research for them like I did for Dr. Magleby, or you get to be a TA like I did for Professor Scruggs when he was here. Those folks can help light your way. They can help you see submerged stumps that you wouldn't see. They can help accelerate your learning. They can help guide and direct you in myriad different ways. And your classmates right now, that are all of you fellow college students, will have rich and varied lives, which you can continue to be part of in a variety of different ways. And I encourage you to be thinking about that now. Don't lose touch with each other. Stay in touch. Keep that contact information, and to the extent that you can, make space for each other in your lives. It'll make them richer and better. All right. Now, kind of the yin, or the yang to the yin, I guess I should say, to put it correctly, of the many small plates approach that I suggested now, I would also suggest that you start thinking about the fact that, of course, the day is coming when you will have to make some decisions, right? Robert Frost was right. The roads eventually do diverge in the yellow wood, and you can't walk them all. You will tell yourself, oh, I'm just saving this one for another day. And sometimes that will be true, like you really will have a chance to walk both paths. But very often in our lives, it's not true. And it just can't be done. There's no way to have every experience, every opportunity, every fork, every branching. So as you're having that small plate experience now and over the next years, you do want to be looking at it with a keen eye so that you're eventually prepared to make the decisions about where you're really going to focus your firepower. That, again, has both professional and personal aspects. I'm not going to talk about the personal ones, but you need always to be thinking that when you're talking about that P word, it's not just professional. That's only part of your life. But what you're going to want to do at some point after sampling is decide, where do I push myself? Where do I really focus my time? Because this bandwidth challenge that you've been experiencing as college students, there's never enough time. You don't have enough time to sleep. You don't have enough time to attend to all the duties that feel like are yours. You probably feel, as I did, that you're a mediocrity on a great many things where you really should be doing better. So good news, bad news. The bad news is that feeling's not going to go away, I don't think. I don't not speak for the entirety of your life, but your lives are probably not at the apex of their busiestness right now. You will take on other responsibilities, other obligations, and have other times that are at least equally as challenging. Now for the good news. It's not bad. It's really good. Your capacity to process those things and to divide your time and to do well will only continue to deepen. I know you have plenty of it now. I'm just saying that as you continue down that path, and remember, I'm 30 years down that path now, compared to some, and some of you are, of course, a little bit further down too, but you will be able to grow and develop in that way. But you will have to make those choices. You won't always be able to sample the bacon-wrapped dates and the tempura cauliflower, you may eventually have to say, I really do prefer the tempura cauliflower to the bacon wrapped dates. And you're sitting right here and you're thinking to yourself, they both sound great, and they are. But eventually you'll have to choose and focus your firepower, because you want to be good at a great many things, but you don't want to be the Jack or Jill of all trades, master of none, right? Eventually you need to have a few things in your life that you say, I am going to be good at this thing, even at the cost of these things over here. And there is a cost. You have to tamp down some things and put them to the side. Okay. One other thought that is related to that, and then we'll take another 2 or 3 minutes and we'll get to questions, is, of course, if I were to try to put in one sentence what it is I'm trying to convey with that last bit, it's, of course, asking yourself, what do you want your life to be about? And the good news is it doesn't have to be just one thing. It can't be everything. But if you ask yourself that question periodically, I think you can help break a little bit out of the tyranny of the immediate, right? I feel like my whole life there has been this competition between what's right in my face, demanding my attention right now, and the things that are critically important. Now, I'll grant you that the immediate and the important are sometimes exactly the same thing, right? If this room catches on fire, we all need to leave. It's immediate and important, gotta go. And you'll have things in your life that are like that. But I bet if you reflect on it, you'll think to yourself, I have plenty of things in my life that are kind of up in my face, one way or another, that are maybe number 5 on the list, or number 17 on the list, or number 473 on the list. But they're recurring and they're immediate, and you have to make some decisions about which things are actually critically important, mission critical, and which things are just there in the moment. The really funny cat videos that you just want to watch over and over again. That's a code in our family with my kids, 2 of whom are here, for when we're like time wasting, all of us, any of us, including me, and my daughter Bethany will then send me like a new cat gif, a new cute cat gif by text every time I say, okay, no more cat videos, let's get back on focus. Final thing I'll offer, and then I'd be happy to take your questions, is as daunting as this BYU experience can be, and it can be, and as daunting as you will sometimes find your graduate school experience or next job experience or volunteer experience, human trafficking that was raised earlier, my word, what a daunting, harrowing, heroic area to be involved in now or later. We worked on that in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Other law enforcement agencies do as well. You're going to have plenty of these challenges. You are going to be tired. You are going to be daunted, but it's going to be great. Not always in every moment, but the overall experience will be amazing. And you'll have many, many wonderful opportunities, many victories along the way. So I hope when you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling like the load is too heavy, because some days it is too heavy, that you will not for very long take counsel from your fears about your setbacks and your problems and your challenges and what's not going right and what you're epically blowing. That's life. That is part of the life experience. You're going to continue to have those experiences, but you will overcome them. You'll be all right, and you'll have a great time along the way, and you'll accomplish great things in a bunch of different areas along the way. I wish I had a way of seeing what you would do over the next 30 years. I bet it will surprise even you. Thanks. And with that, what questions do you have for me? No math questions, please. I was never very good at that.
So I'm getting ready to graduate, and I want to go to law school, but there's a period where I want to be a legal assistant or something to gain some experience and really understand if this is the right path for me.
Yep.
But it's difficult because I don't know any attorneys. How would you go about getting that type of position?
Okay, great question. So first of all, I'll point out that while that path is like any path you might identify, not perfect for everybody, I can tell you that I know legal assistants, including ones that worked at Sidley, who did that for a while, then went to law school after assuring themselves, okay, I do want to get myself into this, and found that to work just fine. But your question, of course, was not about your overall path. It was how do you get your toe in the door to begin with. So you certainly can contact law firms. You can decide, am I going to focus on Salt Lake or elsewhere in Utah, or am I going to be broader? The bigger law firms will have more need for legal assistance. Even in Utah, and when you say legal assistant, you're talking about someone who is not answering phones, not doing copies. You're talking about someone who is doing sort of para-lawyer stuff, but without a certification, right? So in a place, even like Salt Lake, there's probably not a huge number. I would guess at my firm that we might have 6 such people or 7 such people. And I can't think of any that are doing it, right after college, but you can do this kind of thing. So decide on the area, Utah, Salt Lake, broader. You can prepare your resume, make sure it's perfect. That would be one of a legal assistant's jobs, right, is to make it perfect. And then describe in your cover letter what it is you're after, what your objectives are, and decide how far you want that to travel. That's one way. Another thing I would do is I would, through the professors that you know now, find out which of them know professors over at the law school. Many of them have practiced at a wide variety of law firms, both here in Utah and in all kinds of other places as well. They can make an introduction. They can write a letter of recommendation. And that can go a long ways to getting you just that little bit of bandwidth to give you an interview opportunity when something pops.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name's Jenny. I'm a poli-sci major, and I just took a year off of school to work as a legal assistant. Now I'm coming back to graduate, kind of finish up. And now the next step would be law school, like once I graduate. What's your advice on picking a law school? I know there's lots of options where should you choose somewhere that has a scholarship, somewhere that's more prestigious, somewhere that's BYU where you've got connections. What's your advice for picking a law school?
Okay, great question. So like a good trial attorney, begin with the end in mind. Begin with what it is that you want at the end. So, for example, if you or someone else were to say, what I really want to do is practice law in Utah. If you wanted to do that, then I would say you kind of have 2 big paths that I would recommend that you would think. One would be either BYU's law school or the University of Utah Law School, 2 great schools, top quartile, and relatively inexpensive. So you can leave with a smaller debt load or no debt load in some case, which gives you more flexibility if you later say to yourself, you know what, I don't want to practice in a law firm. I want to work for an NGO that is addressing human trafficking. And now the pay is much different and much lower, but I don't have any debt or I have very little. That would be one path. Another path for someone who wanted to practice here in Utah would be to say, okay, I'm going to consider the BYU and the University of Utah Law School, and I'm also going to consider what I'll call the top 10 and use that as a rough proxy. For me, there's plenty of good schools in between, and there are plenty of good schools that are not in the top quartile, so it's not about them not being good. But for a job here in Utah, and you can sort of extrapolate a little bit to other areas as well, I would either go with a strong local school, and BYU, of course, is a national brand as well as being strong and local, or I would go into, if I could get into a top 10, I would consider whether I wanted to take on that additional debt burden, just knowing that that would add another layer of flexibility. You can go anywhere with a BYU degree, absolutely, but there are some brands that are even more nationally known. And so it depends in part of whether you're trying to sort of say it's definitely Utah for me, or I'm more flexible, maybe the Intermountain West. And if you thought I've always loved Arizona or I grew up there, then I'd say think about ASU, think about the University of Arizona as well as BYU and sort of that top band. Where I think it gets harder is when you're talking about good law schools that are not BYU, not the U for here local, and not the very top, that are good and charge every penny that you would pay at Harvard, but maybe not get you quite as much brand recognition. I'd be thinking about the brand and the return on investment and the local connections.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. This microphone is so far up. Every person who comes and asks their question is just brave, because you have to come almost all the way to the speaker instead of hang out in the back.
You're not that scary. It's okay.
Okay, good.
My name is Felicia Caton, and I was curious to see what your thoughts on the human. I want to rephrase my question, actually. So for those of us involved in becoming lawyers or attorneys for human trafficking issues, how realistic is it that we would be placing our family and ourselves in physical danger?
From human traffickers. That's a good question. I don't remember any circumstance during my tenure as U.S. Attorney in human trafficking matters where I was aware of threats that were being made to the lawyers for human traffickers. I will tell you that my overall impression is that these folks want to stay under the radar, and they don't want to provoke that kind of confrontation. They just want to abuse the people that they're abusing and make money from it. So for me personally, I can't think of anything that would cause me to think that that would be the kind of danger that you would say, like prosecuting an organized crime family, especially 30 years ago, would have been. Most prosecutors and most people involved in these law enforcement or quasi-law enforcement type situations, while there is sort of some danger, I think it's not that common to hear about there being problems.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, I wanted to know what role writing has in your career, and specifically how valuable real academic style writing is, or how much you need, more businessy writing skills. So what type of writing skills to develop as an undergrad?
So great question, because there is more writing for more lawyers than people commonly anticipate. Your ability to write well is probably more important than your ability to speak well. Now, I can think of some exceptions. Let's say that you're an in-house business lawyer, and mostly what you're going to do is have meetings with people and make presentations from PowerPoints. Then it would be that kind of I can summarize it quickly, it's a little bit catchy, I learn to engage you in that way. People who are purely in-court lawyers that do almost nothing but go in all the time, so city prosecutors, some DA's offices, they just have a huge docket of cases, and they might go into court for a day, and they got 17 cases they got to talk about. So their oral advocacy is really important. But with the exceptions of those groups that I just identified, lawyers are writing all the time. They're writing briefs, they're writing memos, they're writing reports, they're sending emails, which of course are less formal, but if you're a lawyer, it's supposed to be pretty good, should be very understandable, very clean. Your second question was, is it more academic, or is there kind of a business language that's a little bit different? Okay, I would say it doesn't look quite like the academic papers look like, but it's not a different language, right? The academic papers are a little more formal, often, not always, and so they might not be quite as formal as that, but the premium on organization, grammar, syntax, conveying important points quickly, forcefully, well, making complex issues plain, those are all at a premium, and they're at even greater premium in writing than they are in speaking.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, I'm starting law school this fall.
Congratulations.
And what is your advice for these next 3 years? What is the most important things that I should be doing to kind of further my career after that experience?
Okay, so some of this advice is advice that I think you could apply in your life generally, but it definitely applies to law school. So the quicker you can find a mentor, the better. You can't do that on day one. You just got there. You're just learning. But again, start to get a sense of who do I like in terms of professors. I like how they teach, or I like how they engage the class, or maybe I get lucky and I even have a little bit of interaction with them. And you can make those opportunities happen to a certain extent, right? Just like you can in undergraduate. I don't mean you can guarantee that you're going to get a Dr. Magleby. You sort of have to win the lottery for that. Actually, I won mine in a Cracker Jacks box. I just pulled it out and it said Dr. Magleby on it. No, that didn't really happen. You have to get a little bit lucky to get somebody like a Dr. Magleby. But a lot of people who are teaching because they like students and they want to teach and they want to mentor and they want to connect. Why not find something that's being taught just like you might do here? Go in and ask questions. Go in and say, I was thinking a little bit about this and I wonder if it's connected with that. Or however you might want to do it to build a little bit of rapport during an appropriate time for the professor. Try some of those out, see where you get some relationship, And then you have a mentoring opportunity there. You also have the opportunity to ask for feedback from them. And I would not be shy about doing that for your professors. I did it occasionally here at BYU. Even if I did well on something, I might say, where could I have done better? Or if I did less well than I was hoping, I would say something that was effectively, as long as it was true, I want to do better than this. I want to be better than this. And I would love your direct, honest feedback about how I can be better. You can get the feedback. And then, of course, the professor also knows that you're committed. So those same sorts of things that you might have done here, I would do that there. The second thing I would tell you is 1L, that first year for a lot of students, even students who are going to be terrific lawyers, going to have a great law school career, can be harrowing. I'm not predicting that it will be. But there are a lot of people for whom that feels a bumpy ride. It's different. It's like college, but you can tell it's a different animal, and there can be the Socratic method of teaching where instead of saying, here's this subject, it has 5 main branchings, and then there's 3 subparts here, and then 2 subparts under this subpart, and kind of a beautiful linear skeleton of the beast. Many law school professors, not all, love to teach by asking questions. Instead of revealing the structure is revealed through cases. You don't learn that way in college as much, varies from professor to professor, and it can be dizzying and disorienting. So if you feel like you're taking some punches in the beginning and you're like, what is this? Get an outline, hang in there, and know that that language, just like a foreign language, will start to manifest itself in your brain, and you'll start to get the rhythm of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. I was wondering about just your work-life balance, and you've had a number of different types of legal positions.
Right.
And I'm wondering, like, what the amount of times that you kind of spent, as in maybe hours per week or something. And of course it varies, but
Right.
just in general of your different jobs.
So that's a fantastic question, and I think it is one that lawyers struggle with. I think lawyers think that they're like the only ones who struggle with it, and that's just not true. But I think the legal profession is probably well above the 50th percentile in terms of work-life balance. Maybe not like at the 90th. I don't see it like doctors kind of stuff, but a lot of lawyering, particularly at very large law firms, can be very taxing on the work-life balance. It's not true for everybody. It's not true in every area. But this is something that you'll want to investigate if you're thinking about it. You'll want to try to learn as you consider different law firms or in-house environments. Hey, what's it like? So for those of you who will eventually do some kind of an internship with a law firm or with a business, that's part of what I was trying to say before. Like, it's not just your experience and then what you're asking people and hearing from them. Keep your eyes and ears open, right? When are people coming? When are they going? Is that guy over there been here for the last 17 days? Did he ever go home? This is an exaggeration. But you can start to watch the people around you and get a sense of what's the ethic like for this place. So lawyers in law firms tend to ebb and flow with the business that comes in. When they get a really huge piece of important business that's critical to the client, then they're just on, and the clients expect that they will service them 24/7 until that thing is done. And then there'll be other times where it's less, and then sometimes you hit the Goldilocks spot. You asked me specifically, so how many hours? And you acknowledged that, of course, that would vary, over time. I'm not sure I have a responsible accounting for that. I can tell you that most of my time while I was at Sidley and Austin and all of my time here in Salt Lake so far, I have felt like this is fine, this is doable. And then there have been some significant stretches, particularly where I was in DC doing international travel, which was fascinating and interesting and exciting. But, I went to, I did probably 30 foreign trips in a year and a half. Or nearly 2 years. That's extreme. It was extreme even for my firm. It was exhausting and really not easy for work life. So my prediction is if you go into the area and you go to a large law firm, you'll have to carve it out. You'll have to fight for it. And that's not different from a lot of other professions. I think a lot of people struggle with that. Now we're working more hours per day instead of less. Like society becomes more prosperous and we work more hours. But it can be done. It is a challenge. I hope that's a fair balance of what I think it's like.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hello, I'm wondering what kind of opportunities there are for lawyers, or not necessarily practicing lawyers, but lawyers in public policy. So whether that's with a law firm
Yeah.
or outside of law firm with the government, or with like a think tank or a lobbying firm or something like that.
Great question. So all of those places do have public policy opportunities. Law firms, think tanks, and then working like on Capitol Hill, either directly for elected representatives or for organizations that are interested in a particular issue. It's generally that last grouping, working for an elected official or working for some other organization that's specific to an issue. That usually comes first. So you go, you get the internship, you have the experience, you start to learn about an issue or about how this kind of thing is done, and then you can parlay that later into doing it for some other outside organization that will now pay you, and some of these things will pay in advance, but a lot of them are internships that don't pay. Or as you get really good at it, and you've done it for a number of years, for a law firm that then might have some PR function or public policy function or lobbying function. So you've already know all three groups, and it's just mostly through that last group where you get your initial experiences, cut your teeth, get to know an issue or issues, and then you're on to whatever else you want to do.
That makes sense.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
Thank you to